Welcome back to the Bluechip Breakdown, Vols fans. I'm your host, Bull. It's Tuesday, so it's time for us to take a look at NC State's defense and talk about how our offense could match up versus their defense. Last night, we put out all of the film breakdowns for our defense and for NC State's offense for the members of this channel, so y'all make sure to check that out. And then a little bit later on tonight, we will have the film breakdowns for our offense in the Week 1 game and also NC State's defense as well. Thank y'all so much for all of your support. As always, y'all, please make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Let's go ahead and jump into it. All right, so we'll be starting off with NC State's stats on defense like we always do. And this is just going to be coming from their first game versus Western Carolina. So they saw a total of 59 snaps on defense versus Western Carolina, and they gave up 361 yards. That was good for 6.12 yards per attempt, and they also gave up 21 points in that game. Now onto the passing numbers. They saw 40 pass attempts. They gave up 241 yards through the air, 6 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns. They had no interceptions, and they were allowing Western Carolina to complete passes at a 60% completion rate. And onto the rushing numbers, they only saw 19 rush attempts in that game, which is crazy, okay? But so they gave up 120 yards, 6.3 yards per attempt, 1 touchdown in that game on the ground, and then they also had 2 sacks on defense. Now let's take a look at the key players for NC State on defense, starting off with David Van. He is the defensive end listed at 6'2", 276 pounds. He's number 1 on their roster. Now, these are all going to be their stats from last season. Last year, he had 42 tackles, 5.5 sacks, 1 pass breakup, 1 forced fumble, and 1 fumble recovery. Now, the thing that kind of sticks out to me about their entire defensive line, or maybe not all of them, but at least the players we'll be talking about today, they're a little bit undersized in my opinion. Now, this 3-3-5 has given us some trouble, but let's just kind of talk about us versus Texas A&M last season. Typically, whenever we see this, it's versus SEC teams, and we know that, especially up front, those guys are going to be a lot bigger. So, Texas A&M's, their entire defensive line was like 300 pounds or more. So this is going to be interesting. Now, I think that he is a good player. He's twitchy. Didn't see a whole lot from him in their game versus Western Carolina, but he is going to probably be one of their standout players this season. They are expecting a lot from him. But, I think that we will find some success in blocking these guys just because we typically don't struggle with that speed versus the 3-3-5. It's a lot more about those big guys that are strong. It's not so much that twitchiness. So we will see how they will, perform versus our Volunteers this Saturday. Now on to the next player. We have Sean Brown at linebacker. He's listed at 6 feet tall, 216 pounds. He's number 0 on their roster. Last year, he had 66 tackles, 2 sacks, 5 pass breakups, 2 interceptions, and 1 forced fumble. Now, he has made the transition from safety to linebacker. He's going to be playing will for them. And he's supposed to be kind of like, that more athletic guy. Typically, your will backer is always going to be the one that you kind of want to keep clean, let them roam free because they are going to be the most athletic out of your entire linebacking core. The thing that I will say about Sean, in last week's game, I just was not overly impressed with him in coverage or, just playing out in space, things like that. He is a smaller guy, but he's not as athletic as you would probably think that he should be since he just transitioned from safety. But he is a good player. Obviously, he should be a little bit better in coverage than the average linebacker. Maybe he's going to, come on some blitzes, things like that with some speed off of the edge that could present some problems to our tackles every now and then. But again, y'all, I just not to bury the lead here, but I feel pretty confident about this one from top to bottom. Now on down to their next player at cornerback, we have Aiden White, who's listed at 6 feet tall, 192 pounds. He's number 3 on their roster. Last season, he had 37 tackles, 1 sack, 10 pass breakups, which is very impressive. And he also had 1 interception. Now, he's looked good on film. I've seen some good things from him last season. Again, just kind of going back to the game versus Western Carolina, I did see their wide receivers getting the better of him. I saw them making catches on him. And that's not to say that he's a bad player just because they were making catches. But the thing about it is that was in man-to-man coverage. If it was in a, some sort of a zone and they were able to just kind of like find the soft spot inside of the zone, that's different. But whenever it's man-to-man and those guys are getting open on you, I'm honestly curious to see how their secondary, okay, as a whole, because they're supposed to be really the strength of this team. There's a lot of veterans that are, coming back from last year, and Aiden is one of them. He's supposed to be their best cover guy. I just was not blown away or, really impressed with what he did last weekend. But maybe, their entire team just wasn't as focused in that game versus West Carolina than they will be versus our Volunteers coming up on Saturday. The next player, I'm going to put Red Hibbler right here. He is a defensive end listed at 6'2", 271 pounds. He's number 4 on their roster. Now, these stats are actually correct. Last season, he only had 13 tackles, but he had 6.5 sacks. 1 pass breakup, and 2 forced fumbles, and he actually led the team in sacks last season. So he's got some twitch, he's got some burst to him. He can get to the quarterback. He's got some good secondary moves. Really all their guys up front, you see a whole lot of moving around, which is different, right? Just because whenever you play up against a 4-man front, you won't see a whole lot of pass rush moves on I would say almost like an all the time basis. But these guys will almost kind of like vacate their gaps and spin and things like that. So it'll be interesting to see how we hold up versus that. And again, with them being a little bit lighter, they are a little bit more athletic as well. So how can we match up versus that? I think that we will have some success, but I mean, we do kind of struggle versus that 3-3-5. So we'll talk more about that here in just a minute. But the last player that I want to talk about, last but certainly not least, we've got Caden Fordham. He is going to be their best linebacker on this team. He is listed at 6'1", 232 pounds. He's number 10 on their roster last season. He had 53 tackles and he had 1 pass breakup. Now, he went out early in the Western Carolina game. He had a personal foul penalty, whatever, so he had to miss the rest of that game. But he will be back starting, at the opening kickoff. So he's a guy that I know NC State is excited to be getting back. He's going to be, the guy that's getting in all the play calls from the staff, things like that. He's the heart and soul of this defense playing at Mike. And I think that their defense will look a lot better, especially in run support, because, man, Western Carolina did have some success running the football. We talked about 120 yards on the ground with only 19 carries. I think that that's a little bit of a cause for concern with NC State, but having a guy like Caden coming back should definitely help that out tremendously. Also, they are expected to be getting their star nickel player back for this game, so we'll see how that helps them out in run support, but also just in pass coverage and things like that. All right, now let's talk about the big matchup between our Tennessee Volunteers offense and NC State's defense. Number one, NC State runs a 3-3-5. It is something that we have struggled with in Spurs before. But the thing about the 3-3-5 is, I would say the thing that we probably struggle with a little bit more with the 3-3-5 is if you've got some big, strong guys up front, right? Georgia kind of gave us some problems with that, with that odd man front. I would say that Texas A&M kind of presented some trouble to us also last season. But, as we had touched on in the previous segment, those guys were 300 pounds plus. They were big. They were twitchy. NC State's defensive line is not like that. They do have some players that are about 300 pounds, maybe a little bit over that, but it's just not the same type of athlete. I'm telling you that right now. But we do have to worry about what they're going to do with their linebackers. That's the thing that makes the 3-3-5 so difficult for our offenses, because they can, have 3 up front, but they can bring pressure from anywhere, whether it's with their linebackers or whether it's with their secondary pieces. It can come from a lot of different places. We just have to be able to identify where it is coming from on any given play so that we can make sure that we have it blocked. I think that if we know where it's coming from, then we should be able to out physical the heck out of them. I think that we're going to be a lot more physical than them up front. Our offensive line looked really good, in run blocking, I would say last weekend, but also I think in pass support, and we'll get to that here in just a minute. But it's going to be very important for us to, number one, identify who's supposed to be picking up who on each individual play. And then I would say that number two, we have got to establish the running game early. If there is anything with a 3-man front that you should be able to do, it's run the football. There's, natural gaps there. There's natural creases. So a whole lot of that gap scheme stuff where, we're just using our leverage to just kind of open up those holes. I think that we should do some of that probably early and often. Now, we've talked some in some previous videos about maybe using a 2 tight end set. 12 personnel would work great versus NC State's defense. We've seen that over the past couple of seasons. I've watched a ton of film, and teams that run a 2 tight end set have had success running the football versus NC State. I think that Tennessee can do it at a really high level. Not that we would necessarily 100% need to do that, but I think that it's something that we need to work on, especially as we get further into, this season, SEC play, things like that, because other programs are going to try to run a 3-man front. If we can't nip it in the bud in this game, and not to look past NC State by any means, I think they are a really good team. I just feel like we're going to be able to physically dominate them on all levels in this game. And, I'll also just kind of go back to that 12 personnel with that 2 tight end set. We can still run our tempo and we can flex guys out and use them as wide receivers. That's why I think that could be really deadly for this offense. So I would love to see some of that this weekend. We're hoping that we could see some last weekend, but we didn't, but maybe we will in this one. So again, man, number two for us to have success versus NC State is going to be to establish that running game. And it's probably going to come with a whole lot of gap scheme stuff. Just kind of running the football right at them, getting downhill quick, and just kind of gashing them for some quick chunks, 6-7 yards. If we can do that, then everything else opens up tremendously. We can kind of slow down what they're doing, make them bring more up to the line of scrimmage, like some real guys or guys that are actually really dedicated to the line of scrimmage and aren't just coming on some blitzes where it's more difficult to identify what they are doing. Now, let's go on to the passing game, just because I think that, again, whenever you talk about the way that they can dial up those blitzes, we've got to be able to identify what the heck is going on. That's going to be first and foremost. But another layer to that is going to be with our running backs. They're going to have to be able to pick up guys in pass protection, because it will come off of the edges some. And we have kind of struggled with that with our tackles. Now, I think that Lantur looked better with that versus Western Carolina. I mean, I'm sorry, not versus Western Carolina, but versus UT Chattanooga. Of course, that was UT Chattanooga. But guys like John Campbell didn't look as good with that. If Larry Johnson gets in, he didn't look great with that. Dane Davis has struggled with that, even though Dane Davis looked really good in last weekend's game. Whole point is this: the running backs will be needed in pass blocking in this game. The tight ends will be needed as well. So we got to keep that in mind. As long as we can protect Nico, and as long as he has the time, I think that we will win our individual battles on the outside. Also, just kind of speaking of Nico, he's going to have to be able to understand what their defense is doing. It's not just about them being able to give you different looks from blitz scheme and things like that, but also with their coverage. Typically, for the quarterback, for the offense as a whole, you're going to be reading the safeties, and it's typically only two safeties to understand what coverage the team is playing in. Well, NC State's going to show a three safety look, or kind of like a three high look, a lot of the time. And in those looks, I know that Coach Halsey, Coach Heupel will have some things just kind of dialed up for us to understand based off of the down and distance formation, things like that, exactly what NC State is going to be in, more than likely in those situations. But what happens is, on the snap of the football, those safeties kind of move around to their actual individual spots. So Nico's going to have to be able to ID that really quickly. And if he can do that, if our wide receivers, run those option routes, if we're all on the same page, then I think that we can find success versus NC State secondary, which is supposed to be one of the strengths of their team. I kind of told you I was not impressed with what I saw with them versus Western Carolina. Again, maybe they come in and play better in this game. But the thing about it is, it's mismatches, because we've got some big guys that can run. We have two guys that are 6'5", 200 plus pounds, 24 miles an hour, 23 miles an hour. They can go, and they are dogs, especially Brazel, who, he didn't have the best numbers last weekend, but I think he was also running a little bit more, or he got more targets with Gaston Moore and not as much with Nico. But expect for him as a guy that will go up and get the football. He's going to make those circus catches. He takes great pride in being dominant. He talks the talk and he walks the walk. I just don't see how they can stop that. They're going to have to run some sort of brackets coverage, or, different zones. They will mix a man in there. I just don't see them playing a whole bunch of man. But maybe they have to, because we're going to spread them out. I don't know what they're going to do from a schematical perspective to try to stop our offense, but whatever they try to do, I just do not see it working, because outside of those two that I just mentioned, y'all already know we got Big Brew McCoy, 6'3", 230 pounds. We got Big Chaz Nimrod, 6'3", 220 pounds. And we still have Caleb Webb, 6'3", 215 pounds. We got a whole lot of guys, right? Haven't even talked about Squirrel yet, who is a mismatch nightmare. If he gets lined up, or, if he gets matched up versus, any of their linebackers, really any of their safeties, he's a mismatch. He's going to beat them in one-on-one coverage. Casey Concepcion is a really good player, but Squirrel White is really on that same level. And it just might not seem like it, because he doesn't get the same types of targets as KC does, but he is that same type of good working inside of the slot. I don't know if Mike Matthews is going to be back this weekend or not. Probably not, but Braylon Staley might get some burn. He's another one. He's a dog inside of that slot. So I think that whenever you talk about what we could do to them on the outside, it's going to be a whole bunch of mismatches, and we'll see. It could maybe work out differently, but I feel very confident that our wide receivers are going to go off in this game. Also, our tight ends, man, they're going to be another really big mismatch problem, because all those guys 6'5" and up, 250 pounds and up, and they can all move, especially Ethan Davis, who's kind of, he's like a wide receiver inside of a tight end's body. Truly. So I think that we'll be able to kind of, box those guys out, whether they get matched up with their nickel guy, or whether it's with the safety, or even with the linebacker. So mismatch some type of way, definitely from a size perspective with all those guys. But I think even from an athleticism perspective with Ethan Davis and Holden Stays, they're going to be a mismatch problem for their linebackers. So we'll find ways to kind of scheme it up and get, the individual matchups isolated the way that we wanted to. Coach Heupel is a genius at that. Coach Halsey is a genius at that. So, I think that we're going to go off just as far as the passing game goes, no question. Also, I do expect for Nico to maybe have to improvise some. He's really good at that. He's very accurate on the run. So, I feel good about our offense's chances of just being really dominant in this game, y'all. And, everyone's just kind of pointing to the Oklahoma game as maybe Nico's real coming out party, or maybe even Tennessee's coming out party, where the whole country is put on notice that, hey, Tennessee is for real. I think that it comes this weekend versus NC State, especially with our offense. I think that we will find a ton of success in this one. But those are my thoughts, y'all. Please let me know what y'all's are down in the comment section. And as always, thank you for sticking all the way to the end. Please make sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, share with your friends, family, and other volunteer fans. We'll see y'all in the next one. Thanks. Peace.